My best friend told me no one would ever marry a divorcee with a kid. She laughed right in my face when I said she was wrong. But on her wedding day, when her groom never showed up and she was sitting there in her $1,000 dress surrounded by empty promises, it was my 8-year-old son who walked into that church with a handwritten note that made her collapse right there on the altar. I never thought I'd be telling this story, honestly. 3 years ago, when my marriage fell apart after I caught my ex-husband with his secretary, I thought my life was over. I'm Sarah, by the way. I'm 32, work as a registered nurse at City General Hospital, and I've been raising my son Ethan on my own ever since the divorce. Those first months were brutal. I was working double shifts just to keep our heads above water, coming home exhausted to help with homework, make dinner, and pretend like everything was going to be okay. Ethan was only 5 when his dad left, but somehow this kid became my anchor. He has these incredible brown eyes that seem to see straight through people, and this way of asking questions that make you stop and really examine your life. He'd tell me I was his superhero mom because I could work all day and still read him bedtime stories. What he didn't know was that some nights, he was the only reason I didn't completely fall apart. My best friend Maya had been in my life since college. She's 29, drop-dead gorgeous, and works as a high-end wedding planner. Maya is one of those people who looks effortlessly perfect even when she rolls out of bed. She's never been married, never been divorced, and certainly never had to explain to a child why daddy moved out. For years, she was the friend I called when I needed advice, the one who seemed to have all the answers about love and relationships, but something changed after my divorce. Maya started making these comments that felt like tiny cuts. At first, they were disguised as concern. "Sarah, honey, you need to be realistic about dating now," she'd say, while filing her perfectly manicured nails. "Men don't want to deal with someone else's baggage." When I'd suggest that the right person wouldn't see Ethan as baggage, she'd get this look on her face like I was living in some pathetic fantasy. The comments got worse when she got engaged to Derek 6 months ago. Derek was everything Maya thought she wanted. A 31-year-old corporate lawyer with a BMW, expensive suits, and 0 complications. No ex-wife, no kids, no messy past. He was what Maya called relationship material. Someone with a clean slate who could give her the perfect life she'd always imagined. "This is what happens when you don't settle, Sarah," she told me while showing off her engagement ring. "Derek chose me because I bring nothing but positives to the relationship. No drama, no complications, no extra responsibilities." The way she emphasized extra responsibilities while glancing at a photo of Ethan on my kitchen counter made my stomach turn. But the moment that really broke something between us happened 3 weeks before her wedding. We were addressing invitations at her pristine apartment when she looked up and said, "I need to be honest with you, Sarah. Derek has these successful single friends, but they're not interested in meeting someone with a kid. No quality man wants to raise another man's child. You need to stop living in this fairy tale and accept your reality." When I told her she was wrong, "That love doesn't work that way," Maya actually laughed. Not a small chuckle, but this full-throated laugh like I'd just told the world's most ridiculous joke. "Oh, sweetie," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "You're adorable. But look at facts. You're 32, divorced, working crazy hours at a hospital, and you have an 8-year-old son. What successful man is going to choose that package when he can have someone fresh and uncomplicated?" I left her apartment that night feeling smaller than I had since my divorce, but I had no idea that in just 3 weeks, Maya would be the one learning about reality. Because sometimes life has a way of teaching us that perfection is just an illusion, and that real love shows up in the most unexpected ways. What happened next changed everything we both believed about worth, love, and what it really means to be chosen by someone who matters. After that humiliating conversation with Maya, I drove home in complete silence. Ethan was at his after-school program, so I had the apartment to myself for the first time in weeks. I sat on my couch, still hearing Maya's laughter echoing in my head, and I honestly questioned everything about my life. Was I really that delusional? Was I asking for too much by believing that someone could love both me and my son? Our little 2-bedroom apartment suddenly felt smaller than usual. The walls were covered with Ethan's artwork and school photos, evidence of the life we'd built together. Okay, His dinosaur books were scattered across the coffee table next to my nursing textbooks. This was our world, messy, imperfect, but full of love. Yet Maya's words had planted this seed of doubt that maybe this world wasn't enough for anyone else. I picked up Ethan from school that afternoon, and he immediately knew something was wrong. That's the thing about kids. They can sense when the adults in their lives are struggling, even when we think we're hiding it well. "Mom, why do you look sad?" he asked as we walked to the car, his little backpack bouncing with each step. "Just tired, sweetheart," I lied, but Ethan wasn't buying it. He's always been perceptive, but lately, he'd become almost protective of me. At 8 years old, he seemed to understand that we were a team, that it was us against the world. That evening, while I was making dinner, Ethan sat at our small kitchen table doing homework. He kept glancing up at me with those thoughtful brown eyes. Finally, he put down his pencil and said, "Mom, did someone say something mean to you today?" I froze. How do you explain adult cruelty to a child? How do you tell your 8-year-old that someone thinks you're damaged goods because his father left? Why would you ask that, baby? "Because you keep making that face you made when Daddy used to yell," he said quietly. "And you haven't smiled since you picked me up." My heart broke a little. This kid had already seen too much pain for his age. Sometimes adults say things that hurt feelings, but it's not your fault, okay? You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Ethan nodded solemnly, then said something that nearly made me cry. "Mom, I think some people don't understand that families come in different shapes. We're not broken just because it's you and me." Over the next few weeks, Maya became increasingly absorbed in her wedding preparations. She'd call me with updates about flower arrangements and dress fittings, but there was this underlying tension between us now. She'd make casual comments about how lucky she was to have found Derek, how some people were meant for fairy tale endings, while others needed to be realistic. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts at the hospital. It was easier to focus on taking care of patients than dealing with my own emotional mess. My colleagues noticed I was quieter than usual, but I brushed off their concerns. Nurse Jessica, who'd become a close friend, finally cornered me during a break. "Sarah, what's going on? You've been different lately," she said, settling into the chair next to mine in the break room. "Just friend drama," I admitted. "Someone told me I need to be realistic about my dating prospects because I'm a divorced mom." Jessica's face darkened. "Who said that?" "Because they're an idiot. Maya. She thinks no quality man would want to take on someone with baggage." "Maya's never been married, right? Never had kids?" When I nodded, Jessica shook her head. "Then she has no clue what she's talking about. The right person won't see Ethan as baggage, Sarah. They'll see him as proof that you know how to love unconditionally." Despite Jessica's encouragement, Maya's words had gotten under my skin. I found myself looking in the mirror and seeing flaws I'd never noticed before. Was I really asking too much? Was it fair to expect someone to love both me and my son? The wedding was now just a week away. Maya had invited Ethan to be the ring bearer, which thrilled him to no end. He'd been practicing walking slowly and carrying the pillow with such serious concentration that it made me smile despite everything. Little did I know that my son was about to teach both Maya and me a lesson about what real love actually looks like. The final straw came 5 days before Maya's wedding. She'd asked me to come over to help with last-minute preparations, and honestly, I should have said no. But despite everything, she was still my oldest friend, and I wanted to support her big day. When I arrived at her apartment with Ethan in tow, Maya barely acknowledged him beyond a quick hi before launching into wedding stress mode. "Sarah, thank God you're here," she said, frantically shuffling through vendor contracts scattered across her glass dining table. "The florist is being difficult about the centerpieces, and Derek's best man still hasn't confirmed the bachelor party details." She was wearing a silk robe with bride embroidered on the back, her hair in perfect curls despite it being a casual planning session. Ethan settled himself on Maya's pristine white couch with his coloring book, being extra careful not to mess up her throw pillows. I'd taught him to be respectful in other people's homes, especially Maya's since she was particular about her space. He was working on a picture of a family, a mom, dad, and little boy holding hands, with such concentration that his tongue was poking out slightly. "Look at this," Maya continued, showing me photos on her phone. "The venue looks absolutely perfect. Derek's family flew in from Connecticut, and they're staying at that boutique hotel downtown. His mother already told me she's never seen him this happy." She paused to take a sip of her green smoothie. "It's amazing what happens when two people are truly compatible, you know? No complications, no drama, just pure love." I was trying to be supportive, nodding and making appropriate comments about flower arrangements when Maya's phone rang. It was Derek, and she answered immediately with that breathy voice she used when she wanted to sound adorable. "Hi, baby. Yes, I'm going over everything now with Sarah. Tomorrow's the rehearsal dinner, and then in 2 days I'll be Mrs. Derek Hamilton." She giggled at something he said, then looked directly at me. "Oh, Derek says hi to you too, Sarah. He's bringing his friend Marcus to the wedding, you know? The one I mentioned? He's a doctor, very successful. But Derek reminded me he's specifically looking for someone without complications." The way she said complications while glancing at Ethan made my blood boil, but I stayed quiet. This was her week, and I wasn't going to cause drama. After she hung up, Maya settled into the chair across from me with this satisfied smile. "You know what I realized, Sarah? I used to worry that I was being too picky about men, but Derek proved that waiting for the right person pays off. Someone with a clean slate, someone ready for a real commitment." "Maya, can we please not do this today?" I asked quietly, aware that Ethan was only a few feet away. "Do what?" "I'm just saying that settling is never the answer. Look at Derek. He's 31, never been married, no baggage, financially stable, and ready to start fresh with someone who can match his lifestyle." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "His friend Marcus is the same way, very selective about who he dates because he knows his worth." That's when Ethan looked up from his coloring. "Aunt Maya, what's baggage? You keep saying that word." Maya's face flushed slightly, but instead of changing the subject, she doubled down. "Well, sweetie, baggage is when adults have complicated situations from their past that make new relationships difficult." "Like what?" Ethan asked innocently, his crayon still poised over his drawing. "Like when someone has been married before or has children from previous relationships. It makes dating harder because not everyone wants to deal with those challenges." I felt my face burning with anger and embarrassment. "Maya, stop right now." But she wasn't done. "Ethan, honey, your mom is a wonderful person, but she needs to understand that most successful men want to start their own families, not take care of someone else's. It's just how the world works." Ethan looked confused and hurt. "But I'm not a challenge. I'm Mom's son." "Of course you're not a challenge, baby," I said quickly, shooting Maya a look that could have melted steel. "You're perfect exactly as you are." Maya shrugged as if she'd just explained basic math. "I'm not trying to be mean, Sarah. I'm trying to help you be realistic. Some of us get fairy tale endings, and some of us need to adjust our expectations." That was it. I stood up, my hands shaking with rage. "Come on, Ethan, we're leaving." As we walked toward the door, Maya called after us. "Sarah, don't be dramatic. I'm getting married in 2 days, and I want my best friend there. I'm just trying to help you see things clearly." I turned back one last time. "You'll see things clearly soon enough, Maya. Trust me on that." The drive home from Maya's apartment was the longest 10 minutes of my life. Ethan sat quietly in his car seat, staring out the window, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in his 8-year-old mind. When we pulled into our apartment complex, he finally spoke. "Mom, am I the reason you can't find someone to love?" I had to pull over. Right there in the parking lot, I turned off the engine and twisted around to face my son. His brown eyes were filled with confusion and something that looked dangerously close to guilt. "Ethan James, look at me. You are not the reason for anything bad in my life. You are the reason for everything good." "But Aunt Maya said men don't want to deal with kids like me." "Aunt Maya is wrong," I said firmly. "The right person will love you just as much as they love me. And if someone can't love you, then they don't deserve either of us." That night, I made a decision that surprised even me. Despite everything Maya had said, despite the humiliation and the cruel words, I was still going to her wedding. Not because I owed her anything, but because I owed it to myself to show up with dignity. I wasn't going to let her cruel words make me hide or feel ashamed of who I was. But Ethan had other ideas. The next morning over breakfast, he looked up from his cereal and said, "Mom, in swing I want to write Aunt Maya a letter." "A letter? What kind of letter, sweetheart?" "A nice one, to tell her she's wrong about us." He was serious, that determined look on his face that he got when he'd made up his mind about something important. "Ethan, you don't need to defend us to Maya." "Yes, I do," he said with the conviction only an 8-year-old can have. "She doesn't understand what love looks like, but I do, because I watch you love me every day." I felt tears prick my eyes. What would you say in this letter? I'd tell her that you're the best mom in the world and that anyone who doesn't want to be part of our family is missing out. And I'd tell her that love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing someone every day, even when things are hard. Where did this kid learn to be so wise? "That's beautiful, baby, but Maya probably won't listen." "Maybe not," Ethan said, stirring his cereal thoughtfully. "But maybe she needs to hear it anyway. Sometimes people say mean things because they're scared inside." The wedding was the next day. I'd bought a simple navy dress that made me feel confident without being flashy. Ethan had been practicing his ring-bearer duties in our living room, walking slowly and carefully with one of my throw pillows. He took his job seriously, partly because he was excited to be in a wedding, but mostly because he wanted to help make Maya's day special despite everything. "Mom," he said the night before the wedding, as I was tucking him into bed, "I finished my letter for Aunt Maya." He handed me a piece of construction paper folded neatly in half. In his careful handwriting, he'd written something that made my heart ache with pride. "Can I give it to her tomorrow?" "Are you sure you want to?" "Yeah, I think she needs to know that we're not broken just because it's you and me, and maybe she needs to know what real love looks like before she gets married." That morning, as we got ready for the wedding, I felt this strange sense of calm. Whatever happened at Maya's wedding, I knew I was walking in there with my head held high. I had raised an incredible little boy who understood love better at 8 years old than Maya did at 29. I was a good mother, a hard worker, and someone worthy of love. Maya's cruel words couldn't change those facts. Ethan carefully folded his letter and put it in the pocket of his little suit jacket. "Ready, Mom? Ready, baby." As we drove to the church, I had no idea that Maya's perfect wedding was about to become the day that changed everything she believed about love, worth, and what it really means to choose someone. But my son seemed to know exactly what he was doing. Sometimes children see truths that adults spend years trying to understand. And sometimes the most profound lessons come wrapped in construction paper and written in crayon. When Ethan and I arrived at St. Michael's Church that Saturday morning, it looked like something out of a fairy tale. Maya had spared no expense. White roses cascaded from every pew, crystal chandeliers caught the morning sunlight, and the altar was decorated with more flowers than I'd ever seen in one place. It was exactly the kind of perfect wedding Maya had always dreamed of having. The guests were already seated, dressed in their finest clothes, whispering quietly among themselves. Maya's family filled the front rows, her mother dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, even though the ceremony hadn't started yet. Derek's side was equally impressive, his successful lawyer friends and well-dressed family members, all looking like they'd stepped out of a country club magazine. Ethan looked adorable in his little black suit, clutching the ring pillow with serious concentration. He'd been practicing his walk all week, and I could tell he was nervous but excited. "Remember? Slow and steady," I whispered to him as we took our seats near the middle of the church. Maya appeared in the bridal suite doorway for photos, and I had to admit she looked absolutely stunning. Her dress was a designer creation that probably cost more than my car. Her makeup was flawless, and her hair was styled in an elegant updo with tiny pearls woven throughout. She was glowing with the confidence of someone who believed her perfect day was about to unfold exactly as planned, but something felt off. I noticed Derek's best man, James, checking his phone repeatedly and frowning. The wedding was supposed to start at 2 o'clock, and by 2:15 there was still no sign of Derek. Guests started shifting uncomfortably in their seats, turning to each other with questioning looks. By 2:30 the whispers had grown louder. James disappeared into a side room, phone pressed to his ear. Maya's father kept checking his watch and speaking in hushed tones with the wedding coordinator. Maya herself was still in the bridal suite, apparently unaware that anything was wrong. At 2:45, James reappeared looking absolutely pale. He walked straight to Maya's mother and whispered something that made her face crumble. The news spread through the church like wildfire. Derek wasn't coming. His phone was going straight to voicemail, his hotel room was empty, and his rental car was gone. That's when Maya finally emerged from the bridal suite, ready for her grand entrance. The moment she saw everyone's faces, her confident smile faltered. "What's wrong? Where's Derek?" The next hour was excruciating to watch. Maya's perfect composure shattered piece by piece as the reality sank in. James finally received a text that he read aloud with a shaking voice. "I can't do this. I'm sorry. Tell Maya I'm not ready for marriage." That was it. No explanation, no phone call, no apology in person. Derek had simply vanished, leaving Maya standing at the altar in her $1,000 dress, surrounded by 150 guests. Maya collapsed into the front pew, her perfect makeup streaming down her face. "I don't understand," she kept repeating. "I gave him everything. I'm successful. I'm beautiful. I have no complications. Why would he leave me? I'm perfect for him." The guests didn't know what to do. Some started quietly leaving, others gathered in small groups, whispering about what they'd witnessed. Maya's bridesmaids tried to comfort her, but she was inconsolable. All her talk about being the perfect choice, about having no baggage, about being relationship material. None of it had mattered when it came down to Derek's actual decision. That's when Ethan tugged on my sleeve. "Mom, I think now is the right time." Before I could stop him, my 8-year-old son walked up to Maya with his construction paper letter clutched in his small hand. The entire church fell silent as this little boy in his wedding suit approached the devastated bride. "Miss Maya," he said softly, his voice carrying in the quiet church, "I wrote this for you." Maya looked up through her tears, confused and broken. She took the folded paper from Ethan's hand with shaking fingers. What she read next would change everything she thought she knew about love, worth, and what it really means to be chosen by someone who matters. As Maya unfolded that letter and began to read, I held my breath, knowing that my son was about to teach both of us the most important lesson of our lives. Maya's hands trembled as she unfolded Ethan's letter. The entire church had gone completely silent, and I could feel every guest watching this moment unfold. In his careful 8-year-old handwriting, written in purple crayon on construction paper, Ethan had written, "Dear Aunt Maya, my mom says you're sad because someone didn't choose you, but I choose my mom every day because she shows me what love looks like. She works hard, she hugs me when I'm scared, and she never gives up on people she cares about, even when they're mean to her. Maybe the right person will choose you too when you learn to show love like my mom does. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about being kind and choosing someone every day, even when it's hard. Love, Ethan." P.S. My mom says real families aren't perfect, but they're real, and real is better than perfect. As Maya read those words, something inside her completely broke open. Not the devastation of being left at the altar, but something deeper. She looked up at Ethan with tears streaming down her face, then looked at me, and I saw recognition dawn in her eyes. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've been so wrong about everything." The remaining guests watched in stunned silence as Maya stood up in her wedding dress and walked over to where Ethan and I were sitting. She knelt down in front of my son, not caring that her expensive dress was touching the church floor. "Ethan, can I tell you something?" she said, her voice thick with tears. "You're right. Your mom does show what love looks like, and I've been too blind and too scared to see it." Then she looked at me, and the Maya I saw in that moment wasn't the arrogant, cruel woman who had been tearing me down for months. This was my friend from college, vulnerable and broken and finally seeing clearly. "Sarah, I owe you the biggest apology of my life," she said, still kneeling in her wedding dress. "I wasn't protecting myself from settling. I was jealous of what you have with Ethan. I was terrified that I was empty inside, so I convinced myself that having no complications made me more valuable. But Derek left me because there's nothing real underneath all this perfection." She gestured to her elaborate dress. her perfect makeup that was now streaked with tears. You know what's funny? Derek told me once that he admired single mothers because they know how to love unconditionally, but I laughed it off because I thought that made him weak. I actually thought compassion was a character flaw. I reached out and took Maya's hand. Despite everything she'd put me through, seeing her this broken made my heart ache for her. Maya, you're not empty. You just forgot that love isn't about being chosen for what you don't have. It's about being chosen for who you are, complications and all. Ethan, wise beyond his years, patted Maya's shoulder gently. It's okay, Aunt Maya. Sometimes grown-ups forget important things, but you can remember now. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Maya canceled her honeymoon and instead took time off work to really examine her life. She started volunteering at the children's hospital where I worked, and I watched her discover a capacity for genuine care that she'd buried under years of pursuing perfection. 3 months later, Maya met Tom, a pediatric nurse who worked night shifts and had a rescue dog with 3 legs. Tom wasn't wealthy, didn't drive a luxury car, and had been caring for his elderly mother after his father's death. By Maya's old standards, Tom had baggage. But this new Maya saw something different. She saw a man who knew how to love selflessly. 6 months after her wedding disaster, Maya called me crying again, but this time, they were tears of joy. Sarah, Tom asked me to move in with him, not because I'm perfect, but because he says I have the biggest heart he's ever known. Can you believe that? He loves me for my heart. As for me, 2 months after Maya's wedding, I was picking Ethan up from school when I literally bumped into James, a single father of twin girls in Ethan's grade. Our coffee conversation about the challenges of single parenting turned into dinner, then into long phone calls after the kids were asleep. When James met Ethan for the first time, he didn't see baggage. He saw a thoughtful, funny kid who taught him card tricks and shared his dinosaur facts. When I met his daughters, I didn't see complications. I saw 2 sweet girls who needed someone to braid their hair and help with homework. Maya was right about one thing. Not every man wants to date a single mother, but the right one doesn't see it as settling. He sees it as gaining a family that already knows how to love fiercely and unconditionally. Real love isn't about finding someone with no past. It's about finding someone who chooses your whole story, complications and all. You know what I learned from all of this? Sometimes the most painful moments in our lives become the biggest blessings in disguise. Maya's cruel words almost destroyed my self-worth, but they also led to the moment when my 8-year-old son showed both of us what unconditional love really looks like. That little letter, written in purple crayon, didn't just save a friendship. It saved 2 women from living lies. Maya learned that perfection is just fear, dressed up in expensive clothes, and I learned that the right person doesn't see your past as baggage to tolerate, but as proof that you know how to love deeply. Ethan is 10 now, and he still talks about that day at the church. He doesn't remember it as the day Aunt Maya got left at the altar. He remembers it as the day he helped a grown-up understand that real families aren't perfect. They're just real, and real is always better than perfect. Maya and Tom got engaged last month. Her ring is a simple band with a small diamond, nothing like the elaborate setting Derek had given her. But when she shows it off, her eyes light up in a way I never saw during all those months of wedding planning, because this time, she's not just wearing a ring, she's wearing the promise of someone who chose her heart over her resume. As for James and me, we're taking things slow, building something real with our kids at the center of it. Our first family vacation was to a dinosaur museum because that's what Ethan wanted, and James's daughters spent the entire trip teaching Ethan how to French braid hair. It wasn't perfect, but it was perfectly us. The truth is, we all have baggage. We all have complications, messy pasts, and imperfect presents. But the right person doesn't see those things as obstacles to overcome. They see them as reasons to love you even more fiercely. So if someone ever tells you that you're too complicated, that you have too much baggage, that you need to lower your standards, remember Ethan's letter. Remember that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being kind, being real, and choosing each other every single day. And remember that sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the smallest voices, written in crayon on construction paper, delivered by someone who understands that families come in all shapes and sizes. And that's exactly what makes them beautiful. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're worthy of love exactly as they are. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when someone surprised you with unexpected wisdom, or when a child in your life taught you something profound about love. And if you want to hear more real-life stories about love, family, and finding your worth, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. We share new stories every week about real people navigating real challenges and discovering that sometimes our biggest struggles lead to our most beautiful breakthroughs. Thanks for listening to my story, and remember, you're not too much, you're not too complicated, and you're definitely not broken. You're just waiting for someone wise enough to see that your story, all of it, is exactly what makes you worth choosing. See you in the next video.